Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nello Reads channel. Our first malicious compliance story of the day comes from FTEZ. Not allowed a day off if you ask with less than 2 weeks notice unless you're sick? Fine, I'm sick. I worked at a grocery store in Australia for close to a decade. It wasn't terrible, and management treated us with respect for my first few years there. If someone couldn't make a shift, they'd work with us to find a replacement. We were very rarely short-staffed, so worst case scenario, things would run relatively smoothly even if we were missing a few people on a given day. Fast forward a few years, the good manager retires and an assistant manager from a nearby store is promoted to managing this store. Let's call him Brad for the sake of this story. Brad approached the position with an ego, treating the store as his to fix, even though things had been running quite smoothly for years before he was in the picture. Part of his vision of fixing the store was stricter adherence to company-wide guidelines in terms of staffing numbers and leave requests. For example, the amount of staff to be rostered on is determined by the number of customers through our doors each day. Staff who were actually experienced at this location knew that we needed more than what the company guidelines specified to be able to function efficiently. Within the first month of Brad's tenure at the store, hours were being cut dramatically across the store, causing chaos as nobody was used to the added workload. When confronted about this by other members of management, he immediately dismisses them, quoting company guidelines. During the same period of time, staff began to notice that any request for leave was being instantly denied by Brad. Now, the company guideline is to give at least 2 weeks notice if you know you'll need a day off. But it goes without saying, sometimes friends or family will make last-minute plans you'd like to attend, or you can't work a shift due to other reasons. Prior to Brad, if you needed some time off, it was as simple as honestly communicating your situation with our manager. Almost always, we were able to come up with a solution, and taking a day off was never a big deal. Keep in mind, these guidelines are just that, guidelines, not strict rules that must be enforced. Store managers are given a rather loose collar from higher management. As long as things are running smoothly and staff are happy, upper management will usually take a rather hands-off approach. They won't micromanage every individual store, ensuring every little corporate guideline is being adhered to unless there are obvious issues requiring their attention. So now Brad's about a month into his position. We are short-staffed throughout the store. Everyone is stressed, requests for leave are being denied due to lack of staff that Brad caused in the first place. Brad quotes company policy each and every time he does this too. He won't even allow us to organize someone else to cover shifts as it's too much paperwork. It's a Saturday, and I'm due to work my regular shift that same night. I got a call from a friend with a spare ticket to see my favorite artist's sold-out show. I want to go, and I've spoken to a colleague who's willing to cover my shift, so I'm not screwing over my team. I call the store and speak to Brad, tell him the situation, and that I have someone to cover said shift. Brad predictably gives me the same response that he's been giving everyone else. Sorry, as per grocery store X's staffing policy, you must give 2 weeks notice for any time off. It doesn't matter if someone else is willing to take the shift. Cue the malicious compliance. For a manager who is so into following rules, I was surprised to discover that he never took into account grocery store X's sick leave policy. Staff are entitled to paid sick leave for a day without the requirement of a doctor's note. If you take 2 days or more off consecutively, then you'll need a medical certificate. I call back an hour after my initial call. This time I tell Brad that I've come down with the most terrible headache, and that there is no way I can work that night. He doesn't even reply to me. I can faintly hear him angrily mumble that he'll have to call in a last-minute replacement before hanging up. It didn't take long for staff to catch on to this loophole. Staff needing time off with less than 2 weeks notice would no longer bring it to their manager's attention immediately, instead opting to call in sick the day of each time. Obviously, this ensured further chaos in terms of lack of staff, a problem I never experienced in my near decade at the store. Brad quit after about a month and a half of being manager. Replacing him was the old assistant manager that has been at this location for several years at this point. It took a while to reverse the damage Brad had caused, but things got back to normal with someone who actually knew how to run the store at the helm. I understand corporate guidelines exist for a reason, but it seems like every story I've ever read where a manager decides to follow them more closely just goes completely wrong. It makes me think that most employee guidelines are probably written by a group of people in a big corporate office who haven't worked a lower level position in decades, or at all. So it's really no wonder some of them suck so bad. Our next story comes from Dav2310675. Don't bother you with admin work? Okay, not something I did, but something I saw firsthand over 2 days. Years ago, I worked as a registered nurse on a high dependency ward. Whereas on a normal surgical ward for a morning shift, you would get 6 to 8 patients, on our ward, you got a maximum of 3. Think involved patients with multiple conditions. It was not unusual, as an example, to have a physiotherapist, 2 nurses, and a wards person, or 2, to help walk a patient using a rollator to the bathroom in the morning for their shower. Not because they were heavy, just because of all the pumps and drains that had to come along for the ride, and for their safety. We had a pretty high turnover of staff, about 50% per year, with the average time someone stayed with us being 12 months. Some left after a year because they could get easier and better paying jobs elsewhere. Some left because of the workload. I left after 3 years because I moved 200 kilometers away. But 2 people were constant on our ward. One was one of the ward's persons, not the object of this story, and the other was our ward clerk, Sue. I'll use her real name as I'm pretty sure that was her name. It has been more than 2 decades, and it's a fairly common name. Sue had been there for years, and she was really, really good at her job. She knew how the place ticked. One morning shift, Sue got absolutely upbraided by one of the new registered nurses in our ward. I can't remember her name, it doesn't matter. So let's call her RN Myopia. Whatever it was about, it wasn't actually important. And I was there. I was well past my 12 months there, so I was an oldie. The organizational culture in that ward was that we were a team. Remember the story above about taking a patient to the shower, often needing 4 or more people to help? It was not unusual to come back after one of those shower trips to find that for your other patients, other nurses had done your dressings for you, made a bed or 2, showered one of your other patients, gave out meds, whatever. You didn't have to ask, it just happened. You did the same for the next person when they were tied up. That's just how the place was. Best ward ever. That team approach extended to the wardies and the admin team. They did their work so you could concentrate on yours. You looked after them, and they looked after you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the admin officer on a ward can wield power. You may not think so, but they can. Anyway, Sue got roasted over something that didn't matter, and RN Myopia finished off with words along the effect of, "You just concentrate on doing your admin job, and I'll do my job as a nurse." Mistake. Such a big mistake. Those of us who had been there for a while on that day took a mental note. Sue would not let this one slide. The next day, we had almost the same team on deck. Normal weekday morning, busy ward. In the middle of showers, dressings, meds, mobilizing tests, and everything else, an orderly shows up for one of RN Myopia's patients to take them to surgery. But they aren't ready. The one person who could answer the phone didn't pass the message that the orderly was coming down for the patient for surgery. We watched with amusement, side eyes, as RN Myopia dropped everything to try and prep the patient while the orderly waited. Quick shower with chlorhexidine soap, run through the pre-op checklist, the whole shebang. We made sure her other patients were looked after, but there wasn't any way we were going to get involved between her and Sue. Just as some 15 minutes or so of work was finished in 5 minutes, Sue comes around the corner, before the wardie heads off with the patient and squares off with RN Myopia. Beautifully timed. She says, "Oh, RN Myopia, surgery has called for your patient. I was going to come and let you know earlier, but I got caught up with my admin work. I see they're here, so I'll leave it to you. Didn't wait for an answer or reply, just spins on her heel and goes back to her desk and phone around the corner. It was beautiful. RN myopia didn't last much longer, but Sue did until that ward was closed a few years later. I still miss that ward and the people after 24 years. I think this is some pretty good malicious compliance, outside of the fact that they had to rush Myopia's patient. Like OP said, she did 15 minutes of work in 5, and although I don't have the full details, that obviously can't be good for a patient who is already struggling. But, I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't have the full details. Our next story of the day comes from an anonymous poster. Infinite Loop with supervisor on performance review. Another post reminded me of this performance review at another job 10 years ago. Supervisors were instructed to reduce bonuses. Not that we knew that at the time. The manager had a script to follow, like a call center, and wouldn't stop the review until I understood the content. This was the conversation loop I got them in, and yes, it repeated almost verbatim each time. So, to be clear, it is one of your duties to go above and beyond the needs of the customer. Oh, like when I did X or was acting lead? Yes, exactly. Now, to explain the bonus structure, a 3 is meeting standards, and to go beyond a 3, you have to do well. You really have to go above and beyond to meet a 5. Oh, and at 1, you get fired. At a 2, you get remediation. At a 3, you get to keep your job. At a 4, you get a $200 bonus, and at a 5, you get the 1% raise. I understand, so I'll get the raise, right? This is where the loop starts. No, you get a 3. But you said a 3 is standard. I went above and beyond to do things like be acting lead. Yes, but you were supposed to do those things. I was supposed to, but you said those things were going above and beyond. So, I am a 5. But going above and beyond is one of your duties as an employee here. You are supposed to do that, so you are a 3. So, if I do my duty, I am a 3. To get a 5, I have to go above and beyond, right? Yes. And by going above and beyond, I should get a 5. Yes. So, I get a 5. No, you were supposed to. You get a 3. Let's try a different angle. You said X was definitely going above and beyond. I did X, so I get a 5. You did X on 23rd of month, before the start of this reporting period. It doesn't count for now. So it should count for the previous reporting period then. We discussed the last performance review on the 20th of month, and you didn't bring it up. But I couldn't bring it up because it hadn't happened yet. It clearly happened between the last review and this review, right? Yes. So I get a 5 for going above and beyond, right? You were supposed to go above and beyond, so you did what the job required of you. So you get a 3. And the loop ends and repeats here. It was meant to be a 15-minute conversation that lasted 1.5 hours. It was right next to the break room, so I had lots of people cheering for me silently. During the time, my review was in the supervisor's cubicle, which prevented either of my supervisors from having their lunch or performing any work themselves. It only ended because my shift ended, and I didn't have the tools to fight it. I would have needed to have recorded the things I did and submitted them, but no one did that at the time, so I had written nothing down. The malicious compliance comes after, while talking to my coworkers about a plan we could all enact. So, you think we are all doing 3-level work. So, we'll do 3-level work. No more acting leadership for me. What you said is that going extra is required, but we have to document all instances in order to get credit. Look, I just gave that customer directions. Can I have time on the break room computer to document my success? Oh, we are being graded on adherence to procedure? I better make sure I know the procedure well. Can I have time to read the standard operating procedure? And after I do, I'll make sure to follow every rule no matter how long the customers have to wait? Within a few months, we had the managers clawing their eyes out with our compliance, but it backfired a bit because next year they took away the confusing rating system in favor of a pass-fail system. I know it may seem like a loss, but good on OP for actually getting that confusing rating system removed. Like he said, if you really had to document everything you did to prove you went above and beyond, you'd probably fall behind. You'd spend more time documenting what you did than actually doing things. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and I'll see you in the next video.